It's started snowing this morning in Bergen, Norway, which sets the scene for our next part of the journey. We're travelling across the Baltics and Scandinavia. This is Travelcaster, the travel pod that takes you there. In our 24 hours in Bergen, we've climbed a mountain, crossed a harbour, checked out the history, and delved into a notorious cellar. But now it's time to move on as we travel from Bergen to Oslo, the Norwegian capital. It's snowing in Bergen this morning, and that sets the scene for the next part of our journey over to Oslo, the Norwegian capital. It's going to take over 7 hours on the regional train, but this is billed as one of the most spectacular routes in the whole of Europe, really. I don't know whether the snow is going to add to that or obscure it. We'll find out. Didn't see any of it coming over, of course, because we're on the night train, but today we're on the 11:45 departure. There are 3 direct trains from Bergen to Oslo every day. One leaves at about 8:05, another 11:45, another little later in the day, which gets you in really late at night. But we're all ready to board into our first class carriage. Well, we're about an hour and a half into the journey now. We've just arrived at the picturesque station of Voss. Just going to close the door because it's a little cold outside. But I have to say, Norwegian trains first class is a brilliant experience. The chairs are arranged in a 2-2 formation rather than a 2-1, which you may think is a bit more cosy than what you may be used to, but in fact the seats are really wide, really comfortable, they recline really far. And best of all, halfway down the carriage is a little tea and coffee and hot chocolate station. You could just help yourself to drinks along the way. Now, if you're on a rail pass and travelling in first class, the reservations for this train are actually free of charge. You do have to get online or go to a station. It is mandatory to have a reservation, but if you're first class, they are free of charge. The scenery keeps on coming and keeps on giving. There are fjords, there are mountains, there are fields. There's just about everything that you would expect from a Scandinavian landscape. And if you're in the first class carriage at that little tea and coffee station we were talking about earlier, there's a bit of a bench seat, so it's almost like an observation car on an American train on a much smaller scale, but it's a nice place to have a cuppa and watch the world go by. It's beautiful. And so, after nearly 7.5 hours on the train, here we are. Good evening, Oslo. It's fairly quiet out here because it's snowing and it's freezing, so most people are doing the sensible thing and going indoors. But those views we described earlier just got better and better. As we climbed up into the mountains, there were just the most amazing scenes of peaks and lakes and people getting on the train complete with skis. Clearly they'd had a downhill experience, but for the rest of us it was a journey to remember. So once you get here in Oslo, you're going to turn right out of the station, and in front of you you'll see a big sort of electronic pillar with a clock on top of it. That across the road is King Johan Street, the main shopping street through Oslo, which will also take you to many of the hotels, whatever type of budget you have chosen. But you might be a bit hungry, so you could come into here, the Ostbanehallen, the old train station that has been converted into a multitude of different restaurants. There is cuisine from all over the world, something for everybody's taste here. And the best thing is it's right next to the station, so it's a good way of filling up after that long journey. The prices here are average for Oslo. I just had a burger and fries and a large beer. It came in at about €30. Now, time for another Travelcaster tip, and today we're talking about choosing a hotel and what to do if things don't go so well. So here in Oslo, I stayed last night at the Karl Johan Comfort Hotel. It's a chain, you may be familiar with the name, and they do come in at a kind of budget price, although for a capital city you will be paying a bit of a premium. Now, admittedly, I had booked a budget room. Even so, that still came in at about €140 a night, and last night was not great. The room didn't have any working heating. When I tried to adjust the thermostat, nothing happened. No air conditioning came off or switched on. There was no heat at all. And then in the bathroom, there was a leak. So politely this morning, I went downstairs for breakfast and said to reception, look, what can we do about this? What's your best offer? And in fairness, they offered me two things. They said, well, you can either have a refund for the first night, but we'll keep you in the same room, or we'll upgrade you to our best room. Now, when you think best room, you think, well, what's that going to be like? But I've taken a look, and to be honest, whilst we've been recording this, I've been trying to walk around the room, and I still haven't got from one end to the other. It's absolutely enormous. There's a huge king-size bed. There's a second single bed around the corner, just in case. And there are two sofa beds. I mean, you could have an entire family of lions in here and not be disturbed, and the bathroom is pretty good too. See, the echo there gives you the impression of how big this room really is. So my advice really is to shop around. That might sound like the obvious thing to do, but check out the reviews online and also try and pick a hotel that has a decent cancellation policy when you book. That means, for instance, being able to cancel right up until the previous day in case your plans change. On a long trip like this, they may well do. And also not taking the payment in advance unless they really have to, because if you do run into problems, getting the money back could be difficult. All in all, though, I have to say the staff here in Oslo have been brilliant in giving me this upgrade. I suppose it's the least they could do. And to be honest, that is a bit of a creaky bed, but that's more my weight than the standard of the accommodation. I'm going to have a bit of a snooze. Now, Oslo is a little bit more spread out than some of the locations we've visited recently, but thankfully, like any major city, it's got a great public transport system. Our favourite way of travel is back. The tram at a 24-hour pass here will cost you about €10. Download the local app, it's called Ruter, connect your card to it, and that will allow you to buy a single ticket or a pass for a whole day. Now, to see the cultural highlights, there are probably two trams that you're most likely to use. Both go from the central station. One is the number 11 to Majorstuen. That'll take you to the National Theatre, as will the number 13. That also gives you access to the Royal Palace and places like that. But the place we're heading to, Aker Brygge, the port area, is the number 12, again to Majorstuen from the central station. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stops. As you reach Aker Brygge, the port area, you'll notice quite a few things. Behind me is Oslo's striking City Hall. Built between 1930 and 1950, construction was halted for the small matter of the Second World War. And although the building, to my eyes, looks like it's from the 1970s, it was in fact designed much earlier. It's well, I say a striking building. You can make up your own mind. But behind that, we have the more traditional style of building, as I would call it, which is the former railway station, which is now housed as the Nobel Prize Museum. Just like the one we saw in Stockholm, it pays tribute to Alfred Nobel and his legacy. And next to that is a rather more striking and more modernistic art museum, the National Museum, which has got this fascinating grey stone design. It's a real contrast of architectural styles around here. Kind of makes your eyes go a bit funny in this winter sunshine. Well, directly in front of City Hall, you will see the waterfront, a vast 9-kilometre area of the port of Oslo. It is a busy working port, and as you can hear, we've come aboard a boat today. This one is going over to the island that contains many of Oslo's museums, and for the small price of about €10 you can get an all-day ticket allowing you to hop off at various stops along the way. There are 3 stops starting here from Aker Brygge, at the main port and going across to 2 stops on the museum island. You get free entertainment as well in the by the way of a dodgy speaker system. Well, that was great fun. The ferry across to Museum Island takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and it stops at 2 places along the way. The first is for the Viking Museum, the Viking Ship Museum, which is probably the one attraction that thousands and thousands of people come to see each year, although at the moment it is closed for renovations until 2025. But there are loads of other museums, and we're going to explore at least one of them here on what is known as Museum Island. Now, the ferry that we just took, as I say, a round trip for 1 day. As I say, a 1-day ticket, hop on, hop off, will cost you about €10, and the service is run about every 20 minutes from each of the stopping points, all day and into the evening, so there's no shortage of options to travel on the water. If you do get a bit seasick, there are other ways of getting here. I've just seen a sightseeing bus pull up outside the Fram Museum, and there are also regular public transport services coming over here as well. And the crunching that you can hear below my feet is the snow, which was falling for much of yesterday. Thankfully, it's not falling today, but it has left a rather nice dusty coating, just deep enough to come up halfway up your boots. Well, since we arrived at Museum Island on a boat, it made sense to come here first, the Norwegian Maritime Museum. This is an enormous collection of history and stories and replicas from down the centuries, everything from Vikings to modern-day cruise ships and all in between. And at times you can go into replicas of old boats to see what life on the ocean wave was like back in the day. A combined ticket for here and the next door Fram Museum, which has got the big reconstruction of the boat, is going to cost you around about €25. Now, if the weather's bad, or if you really are a museum addict, you could head for an Oslo pass. This 24-hour ticket will cost you just over €30. If you want to extend it to 72 hours, though, and really get your fill of museums, that'll come in at about €60. Although it's an enormous city of commerce, trade and modernity, everywhere you go in Oslo are open spaces and parks. A place to relax even on the coldest of days, as we've got today. And right at the end of the Museum Island, just near the Fram Museum, is the World War II Memorial. It's a striking maritime sculpture of seafarers looking out, some of them in peril, some of them trying to hang on for dear life. And it's a reminder that the whole of Europe, of course, was affected by the Second World War. And Norway, with its maritime corridors, played an enormously important part of that. And when I say interactive, this is as realistic as it gets. Crashing through an ice storm on the Fram. Built in the 1900s, it was the first ship of its kind to go as far north or as south as it did on its polar expeditions. And it's here in the museum for you to climb aboard and feel what life on board was really like. If you've got any issues with vertigo or stuff like that, you might want to give this a miss. But it's a really exciting, interactive place, brilliant for kids and adults alike. You're listening to Travelcaster, and today we are in Oslo, the capital of Norway. So far we've had a look around the Maritime Museum and explored the delights of the Fram, the historic polar explorer. We've also seen the City Hall and given you some tips of how to get around. Don't forget you can see all of the details at travelcaster.blog, and please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening. This is Travelcaster, the travel pod that takes you there. After a morning of maritime marvelry, it's time for an afternoon of royal revelry. We've come to the Slottsparken, home of the Royal Palace. Now, the Palace Park says an information plaque was opened by King Oscar I in 1847, 2 years before the Royal Palace was completed. Ever since then, the Royal Family's Park has been open to the public all year round, making it unique in Europe. Now, during the winter, you can't go into the palace, but during the summer months, there are guided tours. You can buy tickets through an app, through the palace itself, or at the local convenience store. How very convenient. Now, as with Stockholm, this palace is extremely accessible, even when they're not doing tours. You can almost walk right up to the door. The only things that are stopping you are the guards that are on duty. And at 1:30 every day, regardless of the weather in Oslo, a changing of the guard ceremony takes place. We've got here just about 2:30, so we've missed that. However, it's a very pretty palace, as palaces go. Architecture and symbols of democracy and culture are everywhere here in Oslo. If you walk down from the Royal Palace back towards the train station, you'll pass several notable landmarks. There's the National Theatre, there's the university, and in front of me, the stunning Norwegian Parliament building, flanked in a democratic manner by some protesters who've set up camp across the road. Looks like they've been here for quite some time. There's a big tent and several flags supporting their cause. So now it's time for our quick guide to drinking in Oslo. You can drink in loads of places in Oslo, but don't expect it to be cheap. In fact, it's going to be quite expensive compared to what you're used to paying. Say about €8 for a beer. So, tonight I was in the Sir Winston pub. It's a traditional oldie English pub, except this one had a piano night on, and the singer was rather good. Earlier on, I'd been to the Brygge Bar. Literally, it stands for brewery, and it had lots of brews on tap. Last night, I went to another bar called the London Pub, which had absolutely nothing to do with London, and lots to do with drag queen karaoke that sounded like this.
Vi lurer på, det neste tallet ut Ole Pus I baren. Han må fortelle en applaus som holder ut på oss.
In short, there are loads of places you can go drinking in Oslo. Check out travelcaster.blog for all the details. And with that, we've completed our 24-hour visit to Oslo in Norway. For more information of how to get here and what to do when you arrive, go to travelcaster.blog, where you'll find all the information and loads of great tips. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, and join us again soon for another edition of Travelcaster, the travel pod that takes you there.